100,000 dead, 40 million unemployed, a crisis that will define a generation, all while the president tweets about how masks are politically correct. This is unfortunately reality right now, and it's at times like this that luckily, Congress has stepped in to try and do exactly that. Welcome to the Man of Jackistan, the show currently pending a catchier intro, but where I rant about cool stuff like, for example, today I'll be giving my review of the latest coronavirus relief bill that was just passed by the House. So if legislation sounds interesting to you, then buckle up. And as you buckle in, keep in mind that this show is a work in progress. Hopefully I'll hone in on a permanent format soon enough and get better at things like editing. I mean, seriously, as a 26-year-old, this is painful to put out something with production quality that's so basic. But I promise it'll get better as I do more of these. But for now, there may be unexpected cameos from the air conditioning and maybe one or both of my cats. But what's more painful than being a millennial who isn't born with amazing video editing skills? It's knowing that all sorts of idiots are broadcasting their perverse or even just plainly wrong ideas out here, and that people hear them and believe them. So I hope that by also yelling into the ether, I can at least cancel out one conspiracy theory here and there. As I said, I'll be ranting about the latest coronavirus relief bill that was just passed by the House, which they've aptly named the HEROES Act. This would be the follow-up to the CARES Act from about a month ago. You gotta love the names of U.S. laws. They're pandering at best, if not just outright deceitful. This one happens to be pandering. It was crafted by Democrats in the House, and the word HEROES stands for Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions. Oh, and it costs about $3 trillion in its fullest form. I really have to suppress my urge here to go on like 75 other slightly relevant tangents. It should be noted that while the House did pass this bill, it's been declared dead on arrival in the Senate by Majority Leader and Grim Reaper of legislation, Mitch McConnell. Like so many progressive plans, HEROES flew through the Democrat-controlled House only to arrive on a stack of literally hundreds of other bills collecting dust on Mitch McConnell's desk. He's refused to even take a vote on all kinds of things over the last few years, like a $15 minimum wage, as just one random example. Democratic lawmakers voted and passed that, along with literally, like I said, hundreds of other bills, as well as this HEROES Act. And Mitch McConnell won't even allow the Senate to talk about and vote on these proposals. So think of the HEROES Act as a bargaining chip. Democrats have laid out what they want in this next relief package. The Senate Republicans don't want to pass it, so they'll likely end up meeting somewhere in the middle. That's politics, basically. But before this got released, Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, they were talking about unveiling something of Rooseveltian proportions, which made me excited. It's about time. You know, the country needs an infusion of cash, structural changes, and it needs these fast. Assuming that the government allocates it to the right areas in adequate amounts, it's, like I said, much needed. So as I was skimming headlines at work, I saw the price tag, $3 trillion. And $3 trillion sounds like, and it is, a lot of money. It's more than 10% of the entire country's GDP. And I immediately heard high-level Republicans calling this bill nothing more than a liberal wish list, or, as it was called on Mitch McConnell's website, an unserious wish list. Either way, to have that much Republican resistance must have meant that this bill had, some seriously progressive policies in it. There are certain ideas that I'm a huge fan of. As it applies to this case, it would be automatic stabilizers. It's probably the most important, and I was really hoping for it. Automatic stabilizers would basically bake into law a set of reflexive fiscal responses to economic downturns. So, in other words, if unemployment goes up to a certain rate, it automatically triggers the federal government to send stimulus checks to most Americans at fixed intervals until the problem passes. Until some objective measure of economic recovery is reached, most Americans might receive, like, say, $1,000 a month from the government, no strings attached. The numbers and the specifics involved are obviously up for debate here, but I first heard this idea coming from economist Claudia Sam, and honestly, it makes so much sense on so many levels, which is why I'll happily explore this another time. If the US government did implement automatic stabilizers, I probably wouldn't be super enthused by the final compromised, watered-down result, but it's better than nothing. I should note that in some ways, the economy already has some form of these. Unemployment insurance and food stamps, these are economic stabilizers of sorts. When unemployment increases, the unemployment checks received by out-of-work people and the fact that they can still get food are two important things that keep individuals as well as the country together during these downturns. Anyway, back to reality, progressives want more direct stimulus payments. Shout out to Representative Pramelia Jayapal for trying to pass these recurring stimulus checks into law. Didn't go anywhere, which sucks, but it makes sense. I can see Pelosi's side here and why the Democrats didn't forcefully push for Jayapal's plan. Because the country needs cash. Like, quick. Now. There's no time for this lengthy partisan debate, and such a big, bold, new, and permanent addition to our safety net like this would generate a lot of bickering, which isn't a bad thing, except when several million new workers are filing for unemployment each week and the country's rapidly approaching shambles. Time is of the essence. That's my cliche of the day, but really it is. If there's no chance that Republicans will go for that now, then it really does just become a liberal wish list to tack this onto the next bill. It's not that we shouldn't talk about these things, and we should seriously consider plans like Jayapal's. But, time is of the essence, and overall, I'm no big fan of what looks like the Democrats strategically flinching here. The party that's out of power shouldn't have to go on the defensive like this for desperately needed money. I do think Nancy Pelosi and friends are doing the mature and pragmatic thing here. A little more bluffing might help the Dems get more in the end, although ethically, I think a lot of Democrats have a problem with saying, sorry America, you can suffer because, we aren't getting our way. As adults in the room, Democratic leadership is actually addressing the problem here. The HEROES Act, it won't go down in the history books as some radical, ballsy move, but I bet it'll be remembered more kindly than McConnell's wait-and-see approach and Trump's total abdication of duty, saying, I don't take responsibility at all. It's just a hunch there. And somebody does need to do something. Without swift and thorough action, this temporary dip could turn into a prolonged, painful economic calamity. Chances are we've already sunk into a recession. This country needs a rapid infusion of capital from the federal government, ASAP, to keep things flowing. At least until November, when hopefully the Dems win big. Hopefully donkeys take the House, Senate, and the presidency, which I like to call the trifecta of power. And hopefully we can pass some sweeping watershed legislation after that to seriously make some history here. Hopefully. Whether or not that happens, we'll need a very large coronavirus recovery bill in the medium future to create jobs and things like that. Right now, we just need more relief so that America can simply stay afloat until after the election or until the virus disappears, or until Trump grows a brain and two balls to be a real man and pivots to handling this well, aka hell freezing over. For now, we just need to stay afloat. What then do we include on our life raft here? If the HEROES Act miraculously made it into the boat, completely unfettered by the Senate, which, again, it won't, it still has some pretty exciting pieces in it, which would go on to help tens of millions of people. I guess my lackluster response to this was due to the hype buildup before they dropped it, and because most of what it does just reiterates moves from the CARES Act. But that doesn't take away from its ability to really help things right now. Maybe in all of this I've become desensitized to the awesomeness of free money. The HEROES Act would include another one-time stimulus check for $1,200. Families are eligible for $1,200 per kid this time instead of just $500, maxing out at $6,000 per household, which is more than before. Other than that, basically the same thing here. And unless you owe back child support, or are a child, or not in America legally, under this proposal you get more cash. And this part is important for my millennial and Gen Z audience. Young adults are less likely to be excluded from stimulus checks in this bill, which is crazy since younger people are harder hit during recessions and more likely to work in service jobs like retail, hit hard by the pandemic. Last time, there was a loophole that wrote college students and a lot of Americans aged 16 to 24 out of getting the checks. HEROES corrects that. If you're in college and a dependent, your parents get the $1,200 per head, plus they retroactively would get the $500 that they didn't get from the CARES Act. It's confusing, but it's money. Money that this time, people my age would be more likely to receive. Or your parents, at least. And while I'm blabbing about college stuff, it may interest many millennials and Gen Zillennials to know that the HEROES Act includes some modest student loan relief as well. I was happy to see this because student loans suck, and they were killing my credit before this. So the previous CARES Act suspended interest compounding on federal school loans, and it suspended payments until September 2020. The HEROES Act would go even further, stretching the time when no loan payments are required all the way through September 2021. Not only that, but it knocks $10,000 off of your federal education debt. The application for private loans here is a little less clear, but Democrats want to absolve at least a portion of public debt here. Just gone. Poof. These measures seem to be gaining a little bit of bipartisan steam, at least a little bit. Mitt Romney signaled some interest in doing this, or something similar, which is great. I'm loving Mitt more and more each day, and I love this proposal. But that's the gist of it. My one small but real complaint about this part is that apparently you have to apply to get the $10,000 taken off and to have this debt reduction. It's not just automatic. And so this little technocratic requirement might end up excluding some of the people who need it most, not unlike what happened to business owners from marginalized groups with the PPP loans. It's not exactly identical, but the risk of exclusion is definitely there. I'm going to save the meat of the matter for the next episode. That's right, back to back. So just a heads up here. As I continue talking and loving what I'm saying, I realize that this is going to have to be broken up into two parts. Unfortunately, everyone watching this today has a goldfish-length attention span, although I imagine my viewers a little bit less. Nonetheless, posting a 50-some minute video like the one before this would probably not fly. As much as I hate to break up these rants into smaller segments, I do like to keep the content together, and I hate stopping when I'm on a roll. I'm going to see how this looks if I break it up. Like I said, this is a work in progress, And chances are I could get away with not going on and on with this little aside here, but to me it makes sense to give you the real scoop. And hopefully you come along as this project blossoms. You can say you were in on the ground floor when this was a choppy mess looking like it was assembled by a semi-schizo boomer. So on with it. More of the lettuce, cheese, and tomatoes in this hero. Get it? The bill gives like $100 billion to help prevent evictions of low-income renters, and yet another lots of billions for mortgage assistance. Also, farms get something. I didn't actually delve too far into what farmers get because I'm a suburbanite near Philly. Keeping farms intact is important on so many levels, which I can appreciate, though I won't pretend like I know anything about farming. So, next item. Yes. The somehow controversial aid to state and local governments. Or, as the Grim Reaper and Republican Senator Mitch McConnell called it, blue state bailouts. This, even though his home state of Kentucky uses more federal resources than it contributes, unlike, say, New York. It's often kind of ironic that a lot of the states which reject a lot of types of assistance are the ones that actually need it the most, whereas blue states support policies that assist their less fortunate neighbors. And that's a whole nother episode, too. But Mitch McConnell, he calculates his words wisely. Recklessly suggesting that these governments file for bankruptcy is paving the way to achieve a long-sought conservative agenda item, lowering government spending. He may eventually budge on giving cities and states the funds that they desperately need, but only in exchange for promises to radically slash budgets and privatize a lot of things. See, during the Obama administration, Senate Republicans mastered this strain of obstruction. You'd think with GOP control of the Senate and Oval Office, the tables would turn, but no. Very often, all too often, the onus is on progressives to actually do something to achieve policy goals. Conservatives frequently just need to obstruct activity. Inaction is their action. The status quo is innocent until proven guilty or in need of revision. Here, the shrewd strategist Mitch McConnell is going to bring states and cities to the brink of ruin just to impose spending restrictions in the future, most likely. It's a dangerous game of chicken, and honestly, the man's really ghoulish. The nickname Grim Reaper is more fitting than it probably should be, especially pertinent now. This isn't just a dig at the man because I disagree with his politics. Look up his bio. I'll cover it another time. He's a gold digger and a ghoul. Overall, the right-wing conversation surrounding the budget crisis is one of blame. A typical tactic from the right. Poor money management is their blanket accusation for places that are fastly approaching a fiscal cliff. And I can't speak for every place in America. Some do spend probably more than they should. But overall, under these circumstances, to just label every locality irresponsible suggests a fundamental lack of understanding about the economics of this. So I'll break it down. First of all, a public health crisis causes cities and states to have to use up more resources than normal in order to properly address the disaster, so their expenses go up. Meanwhile, states and cities get a large share of their tax revenue from sales taxes, which go down when everybody's inside, out of work, and not spending. General sales tax brings in a lot of money, plus many places rely on taxing specific goods or services, a tobacco tax, a gas tax, hotel tax, whatever. Altogether, sales taxes are responsible for 23% of states' revenues, according to the Tax Policy Center. Individual and corporate income taxes combined bring in just above 20% of revenue. So states are crunched for cash from both sides, having to spend more and bringing less in. And cities have even smaller budgets. Not every state or city is facing this problem, and I suspect the positions of Senate Republicans might be a little different if Kansas was the epicenter of the pandemic. But not this time. The most pressed areas are blue and purple with denser populations, which tends to correlate with Democratic votership. See, this is where the national governments indisputably have a role. Federalism has unique advantages. State-by-state responses, all that, it's good. But the Articles of Confederation failed for a reason. We live in a union of states. Illinois can't print its own money, or at least not while anyone's looking. Illinois or New York City or wherever, it can't do deficit spending on the scale that the federal government can. Aid, bailout, call it whatever you will. DC has to help out the areas that need it most, especially after the atrocious response from the Trump administration. I mean, God, it'd be one thing if Trump took the wheel and acted like, a president in this situation, but while he was tweeting away conspiracy theories, competent governors across the country from both parties stepped up to do the job that they were hired to do. They made some tough decisions, used what resources they had available, and served, and continue to serve, their states to the best of their abilities. Mayors, too. Trump didn't want to do any of the real governing, the kind that normally chief executives do. And if he wants to be a pussy, that's fine. If his Republican colleagues want to be complicit, that's their move. But at least then free up the resources for the states and cities to do what this president can't. And that's competently or even semi-competently manage a crisis. Politicians, they suck often, but it's important that we the people, their employers, hire the right candidates to represent our interests in the government. The ability to lead during an emergency probably outweighs how much someone owns the libs or promises that jobs from 50 years ago will magically return. But the beauty of democracy is that we rotate out the scuzz every so often. Only then can we upgrade and make it better. Seeing a dunce like Trump get elected POTUS could easily induce cynicism and apathy, and that's a normal feeling with him in the office, but if we give up, they win. There's even more rant of me assessing the HEROES Act in the next video, so check it out. Also rate this, review it, share it, and rate it good. I'm the Man of Jackistan, about to record the other half of my thoughts.